It's the 17th of May 2022. Welcome, everybody. I'm Dana Durnford. I hope you're having a good day. I'm also known as the nuclear proctologist.org. And my jingle is 709-589-4406. 4406. Everybody's having a reasonable day, if that's even possible. We're going to just get right into it. News cycle shows disarray in the nuclear industry. We got a poll for everybody tonight. Should monsters who urge victims to return to the Fukushima nuclear wasteland be charged with genocide? And the appropriate answer, of course, is yes, absolutely, positively, unequivocally. And we're happy to see that that is dialing up. The International Atomic Energy Agency is the incarnation of the devil. One of the first things they done after Fukushima melted down was told the Canadian nuclear industry to go ahead and lift all restrictions on radioactive food in Canada, while 55 countries banned it for a decade before the industry took over those positions and lifted the restrictions. Canada lifted restrictions after 93 days. And what that meant was that the incredibly radioactive, lethal food that they continued to harvest and couldn't ship anywhere, the only spot you can ship it, rather, was Canada. And so Canada now has been destroyed by the radioactive fallout. And it wasn't just Fukushima, it was 14 prefectures. If that don't make you angry, it's time to pinch yourself, because you're sleepwalking into an extinction event. Would you eat food from this spot here? They're harvesting food right alongside of 1-ton bags of nuclear waste in a nuclear wasteland. And so I can understand that people can't wrap their mind around it. Not really. How about this? If you eat food from around nuclear power plants, you're going to get sick, and your children will get sick. You're bioaccumulating radiation all the time. It wrecks your immune system. And you're talking, the majority of nuclear power plants are surrounded by farms. All nuclear power plants are hemorrhaging radiation, and also just incredible hemorrhaging from the fuel pools. This is absurdness, because the fuel pools, the reactor cores go in there, they're still split in the atoms that would normally boil water for millions and millions and millions of homes. Those atoms are now released, and a lot of it will get sucked up by the farms. The IAEA chief, Rafael Grossi, is going to visit Fukushima, he claims. We find that hard to believe. And this picture here, you see that stack there. The other stack are skinny stacks, right? This stack took him 2 years to remove the top part of it. It's incredible lethal doses by the stacks, by the way. Now, them skinny stacks are hemorrhaging radiation from the fuel pools. That's why they're so high. So the radiation, by the time it lands in the farmers' fields. That's the point. The point of the farmers' fields is to suck up radiation and then get rid of it by shipping it to your supermarkets and poisoning everybody. Some Fukushima residents will finally be allowed to return home 10 years after a nuclear disaster. This is why we have a poll. Should the monsters who urge victims to return to a nuclear wasteland be charged with genocide? And of course, they should be charged with genocide and publicly executed for it also. About 2.4% of the prefecture land is said to be still contaminated. To put that into perspective, the radioactive fallout from Japan contaminated the entire planet. So the claim that only 2.4% of the third largest prefecture in Japan, by the way, is absurdness. 55 countries banned the food from 14 prefectures because they're, contaminated. So to have this claim that only 2.4% of the prefecture is said to still be contaminated is an absurd betrayal. So at all nuclear power plants, you'll see these skinny stacks. The one by number 4 is also connected to the incinerator. All nuclear power plants also have incinerators. And so the ejection up to these stacks are for fission products into your community. So if you wonder why there's so much heart problems and liver problems and lung and respiratory and pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline, Alzheimer's, dementia, autism, diabetes, Down syndrome, and the list just keeps going, there's around 1,800 illnesses, not counting cancer. Why this has exploded worldwide? Well, they're shipping food from right by the nuclear reactors. They have poisoned the entire planet with just the shipping of the food, not counting the actual radioactive fallout. You need to make a stand. This is Earth's last stand. And if you don't make the stand, who will? Japan will lift the evacuation orders for a single Fukushima village on the 12th of June. They got to drive past 150,000 sites like this for some of the residents, because this is 1 ton bags of radiation that they're actually cutting open and growing food in because people have refused to pay attention and hold them accountable. They've gone to triple evil mode. To return home almost a decade after it was deemed off limits. And they tried really hard. In fact, some of these places never got evacuated for 2 to 3 months. And we're talking big cities. Like Fukushima City was supposed to be evacuated, 340,000 people. They didn't do it. The mayors were afraid they were going to lose their jobs, apparently. The definition of monsters really should only apply to the nuclear industry and the military-industrial complex, but particularly the nuclear industry. Authorities have decided to end the difficult-to-return zone. They don't name the authorities, so-called authorities. If there were authorities, they wouldn't actually do that, by the way. So the nuclear industry gets a couple of people in key positions. They call themselves the authorities, and then they just lift the restrictions. Which is what we've seen with the EU and America. Exports of food into those countries. Just a small, less than a handful of people made that decision to poison the entire population of those continents. The definition of evil is real. It's nuclear. If you think I'm wrong, go there and mark on all of these bags, Dana is wrong. In 2011, all residents of Katsusaru village were ordered to evacuate. Yeah, but that was way after the damage was done, by the way. So they went there with homeless and destitute and victims of society and picked up millions and millions of bags in just 3% of the land. The idea was 100% deception. One of Japan's worst nuclear disasters. We don't really see that connotation very often, do we? That implies Japan's had a lot of nuclear disasters. Go there, you see all those tarps, green tarps in the background? They're covering piles of 1-ton bags of radiation. Go there and marking all of them radiation good, Dana bad. One of Japan's worst nuclear disasters. But it was actually almost 500,000 people that left their homes, and they whittled the number down now to 160,000 in increments over the last number of years in order to make nuclear have some redeeming qualities. After it was contaminated with radioactive fallout. Contaminated that's an incredible polite. It's an unbelievable polite way of describing what really happened. Yeah. Initially, 12% of the prefectural lands were said to be contaminated. 12%. 12%. This is a map from France of the radioactive fallout. That's the Pacific Ocean just got destroyed. This is the Atlantic Ocean. That's Europe. And by the way, that's just 16 days. So to suggest 12% was contaminated that's the definition of evil, by the way. Was said to be contaminated. Several areas were gradually declared safe by monsters for residents to return to the nuclear wasteland, with just 2.4% of the prefectures still covered by a no-go zone. This is 16 days. This model is not based on the actual melted reactors. On top of that, the model is just based on venting. Not that you got to realize 680 kilometers of the coastline was stripped out. There was no power to vent it. It's 100% lies. I'll just show you one of the 4 reactors of the apocalypse at this moment. This was the mixed oxide fuel reactor. This is these burn around 200,000 times hotter than a vicious normal, if such a thing is possible, reactor meltdown. The government, let me put this on cut. Where's the cut to? The government, where are you to, Dana? The government in April also partially lifted evacuation orders in Okuma. And Okuma is 2.5 miles, less than 4 kilometers, from multiple melting reactors that will probably be melting down for at least another 10,000 days at least. I'm sorry, years. Paving the way for residents to return. See, Fukushima Prefecture is in the middle of this pile. Each one of those markers is a prefecture where food was banned by 55 countries. Do you think 55 countries got it wrong? Do you realize how much trouble you're in every time you go to your supermarket? Do you realize how dangerous it is to have anything to eat anymore? Do you realize that the nuclear industry loves every facet that you're being poisoned and made sick? And that they've done everything they can to destroy your future, your children's future, humanity's future, and the 8 million species' futures. And continue to do so. And that the most important thing you could do is get educated, at least try to protect yourself and your loved ones. And in the future, you might be rejected now about this conversation, but in the future, people will remember that you knew about Fukushima and will seek you out. So don't be discouraged when people don't comprehend it or not able to wrap their mind around it or don't understand the urgency. It also pushed safety campaigns. Just some kind of sick joke. To send former residents home. They push safety campaigns to send them back to a nuclear wasteland. They're actually harvesting food alongside of 1-ton bags of radiation. Name somewhere else on the planet where they done that. I double dare you. Contaminated with radioactive fallout and designated as unsafe for living. So if your communities are unsafe for living, what's it like to be at ground zero with their titanium vest? These are the home and paper suits. Titanium vest and paper suits. There was a monument. Fukushima residents complained over a statue of a child, which is simply not true. This was the nuclear industry that complained. A statue of a child in a radiation suit. How is a child in a radioactive suit worth complaining about? It's the nuclear industry saying, don't look at me. I'm hideous. Think about the statement here. We may not be able to live in Japan someday. You might not be able to live in Canada someday or the United States someday because of Japan. Speaking of demons, Rafael Grossi, the head of the International Atomic Energy Agency, also known as the devil to his close friends. The devil, also known as Raphael, is going to go to Fukushima. We got a little video of that. It's the strangest video you're ever going to see. His head looks like something somebody made with clay dough or something and then poked it on top of the stump that they call Raphael. What's he smiling about? Look at him. Sadistic little piece of... Look at the head on him, though. I mean, seriously. Doesn't that look like an alien to you? This is really rare. You get these pictures where they zoom in from a drone. So you can't get any detail out of it, you know what I mean? There they are, that's 3 of them, 3 reactors of the apocalypse. There's another one coming up. They faked reactor 3 and reactor 4 fuel pool removals. The twisted little sadistic demons. I didn't want to play all the video because I love these little screen captures, this little moment in time. Look at this little twisted, sadistic, little demonic demon known as Raphael. There's many like him, right? They're all the same. They're some bizarre little creatures is what they really are. Let's play. We got a little video coming up here right away. Here we go. 1, 2. Right there, right here. Oh, the next video is what I'm looking for. That's him, by the way, when he took off his face mask. He's at Fukushima. Die, you scum, is what he's saying. I can translate it. It's very difficult, but I was able to translate it. He's saying, die, scumbag, human race.
The Japanese government aims to begin releasing the water.
Every step of the way. Well, as the head of the agency, going there and having my own assessment will help me make my own assessment and come to my own conclusions.
Grossi says he intends to hear from locals.
That would be a first for an International Atomic Energy Agency leader. Does anybody actually believe he's going to go there? Does anybody really think he's going to go to the nuclear wasteland? By the way, there's not 1,000 tanks there. There's only 750 tanks. He's going to be out sniffing bicycle seats is what he's going to really be up to. There's zero possibility that creep of nature, the genocide machine, is going to physically go to a nuclear wasteland. Okay, and so the idea of what he's saying, that he's allegedly going to go to the nuclear wasteland, about the sieve to water, the whole scenario. China just come out and said, stop what you're doing right now, which is playing into the deception. China knows the difference, by the way. So let's go look at the water filtration system that they allegedly had. They had two types there. August the 12th, 2014, TEPCO to abandon the Areva system. Let me figure this out. Always suffering, trying to keep everything moving along. So 2014 in August, 3/4 of the way through the year. For the last 3 years, the Areva system was kept out of operations. So that was one of the filtration systems. As soon as they turned it on, it was so radioactive they could never get near it again. This was the same with the ELP system, April 21st, 2014. The Advanced Liquid Processing System, which is 100% nonsense, of course, because you can't filter radioactive water because you can never get near the filter again. The idea of the tanks was to trick you into thinking they didn't kill and poison the Pacific and the entire planet. But what I'm going to show you will help you understand this facet of the most important facet of this equation, by the way. TEPCO, which was nationalized, is not a decommissioning authority. It was then, because it's nationalized, it went bankrupt. It was nationalized. It's the Japanese government, the nuclear industry itself, see? So when they say TEPCO, the idea is to switch the blame away from the nuclear industry and blame it on a fictitious corporation that no longer exists. The utility which operates the plant promises to treat all contaminated water. We swear, promise. This is ludicrousness. You're supposed to have every nuclear scientist, or at least one on the planet, should go there, shouldn't they? We've had polls on that, and everybody agreed. Yes, nuclear scientists should go to the nuclear power plant. I think we had like 70 votes, and 2 votes that said, no, nuclear scientists, we can't go there, we'll get killed. Which operates the Fukushima Daiichi plant, promised to treat all contaminated water by March 2015. A goal it's emitting will not be realized because the system has yet to function. April the 21st, 2014. And there's lots of parts of the sites where they don't even have full control. You know what that means? It's lethal doses, which is why no nuclear scientists have ever went there. They also claimed they were going to put a bypass operation to pump water from the mountains coming down, to pump it around the plant into the ocean. That didn't work. The officials, aka mass murderers, admitted the groundwater bypass operations are failing to reduce the water. And when they call it cripple, I like to cripple anybody who uses that word. At the Fukushima Daiichi plant, it's absurd to call this place crippled. It's insulting. It's revolting, and history will not remember them kindly for this. TEPCO says they don't know when, if ever, the pumping operation will have any tangible effects on the groundwater. So the bypass operation was a flop. The Areva system, or the ELP system was a flop. The Areva system was a flop. They failed to deliver on a promise to install $1 billion fence to stop the contamination from leaking. the word leaking, look it up sometime. It doesn't apply to this. TEPCO asked the government not to announce they had committed to constructing the fences as utility was concerned. The $1 billion to construct the fence. But yet they had 260,000 people build an ice wall for $340 million. Which is ludicrous, of course, because it meant that everybody made over $1,000. There was no money left to build the ice wall. Rather than build a real wall, of course. TEPCO's ice wall operation not meeting expectations. So let's review that again. The Riva filtration system didn't work in 2014, nor did the ELP systems work in 2014. They didn't build an ice wall. The fence didn't work. The bypass operations didn't work. The ice wall can't meet expectations. You can't get it to freeze. Because why not put in a real ice wall? They admit that the ice wall won't stop the groundwater. And that the American government flew over the site looking for iodine-131, which is mostly a beta emitter, but 10% gamma, because it decays in the different isotopes also, right? There's 10 different decays. The new map of radioactive iodine, now this one showed at 1,000 feet above ground, at 3,000 becquerels per square meter of just the iodine-131 for 30 kilometers. These are, you can extrapolate uranium, plutonium, curium, americium, neptunium, strontium, and just thousands of fission products from this equation. Not that they're going to do that for you, not that you ever probably seen that unless you came here. So what he's doing is the shell game where you have 3 shells, you put a P under it, and then you move it around. And neither one of them will have the P under it when you check. You won't make the money. Like, to take the job, you got to be incredibly evil to get that job. You got to be completely disconnected from any kind of rational thoughts. You have to be a genocide machine to take that particular job. And you have to have a capacity for evil unknown to any prison system on the entire planet to get that job. You got to be evil times infinity to actually have that particular job. And guess who got the job? Raphael, Grossi, this particular time. Elon Musk tweet says Japan will eventually cease to exist. He has no idea how right he is, I guess. Without higher birth rates, sets off an angry reaction. This is nonsense, of course. A tweet from Musk about Japan's declining birth rate touched a nerve among a few people on social media and triggered some angry reactions from his 80 million followers. He's always got angry reactions. It'd be a loss for the world, he said. Japan has observed a steady decline for 11 consecutive years, which happens to be when Fukushima happened, by the way. Let me explain that to you again in a typical single headline. That within the first year there was an extra 865,000 cancers, according to the Japan's National Cancer Center. It was a spike of almost 1 million cancers. And cancer is typically latent. Cancer is typically the last illnesses to show up from radiation exposure. Problem was, Japan didn't have radiation exposure. They had a radioactive catastrophe that contaminated every facet of their country. Their water supply was completely contaminated. We know this because the water filtration system, the water reclamation centers, the sediment from filtering the water is so radioactive they can't get rid of it in any community. The sewage in every single community is so radioactive they can't get rid of it. The garbage facilities are so radioactive. The ashes from the incinerators, which is evil, by the way, because when you burn radioactive garbage, it's dirty bombs all day. You're releasing into the environment. And the ashes is proof, because the ashes typically are at least 70,000 becquerels per kilogram of just the gamma. Like, the whole story is the world needs to rescue Japan from Japan. And the world needs to rescue Earth from Japan. Fukushima residents will return home in June to a nice fancy nuclear wasteland. Yay. Restrictions removed at the Fukushima Daiichi plant's 16 square kilometer off limit. This was several years ago, 30 million tons. 30 million. That if you put one ton bag, in the back of a 1 ton pickup trucks, back to back, bumper to bumper, that's 5 rows of traffic, bumper to bumper, around the entire planet, which was only 3% of the land. Mostly farmland that they cleaned up. And I always used to say that, and then I got to retract it, that they picked up the topsoil from. A lot of the farmland, they just flipped the soil over. The whole industry is insane. And renewables, of course, will displace all coal, gas, oil, fossil fuel plants, and nuclear by 2026 in capacity. There's going to be around 5,500 nuclear power plants worth of renewables online between 2020 and 2026 of new energy. It's 4,800 gigawatts of renewable energy. It dwarfs all fossil fuel on the planet and all nuclear combined. And so once it hits 2026, the price, is, by the way, is just, in 2020, was half of nuclear. And so imagine the ability to produce this stuff by 2026. So by 2030, there's probably going to be around 15,000 nuclear power plants worth of renewable energies online. Last year was 3,300 nuclear power plants worth of renewables in a 12-month period came online. If you take wind and solar, for instance, which is the main one we see being built, you back it up with geothermal, which is 24 hours a day of energy, and tidal energy, which is 24 hours a day, and you can predict these for 3,000 years, the cycle. And then you back that up with pumped hydro and compressed air storage. You don't need anything, any oil, gas, or coal. But the industry is scuttling all of this in order to try to squeak out a few more nuclear power plants. Anything to destroy our future, that's what the nuclear industry is up to. They're doing everything they can to destroy all species and humanity in the next couple of years. And they're gone into overdrive on top of that. We'll be allowed to return home to a nuclear wasteland as the evacuation orders have been withdrawn by a handful of monsters. So should the people that are sending people back to a nuclear wasteland, hi everybody, should monsters who urge victims to return to Fukushima nuclear wasteland be charged with genocide? And we got 100% votes that yes, they should be returned to genocide. And bless your hearts for acknowledging the evilness. The zone totals about 337 square kilometers, give or take a couple of continents. I mean, my goodness, how can people ignore the models? And there's many of these models, by the way, but this 16-day model from France's government of the radioactive fallout based on venting, which couldn't happen because there was no power for 480 kilometers of coastline. How does that actually work, that people can pretend that that doesn't? I mean, when you think about they picked up the bags in the community to get people to move back into the community, into an actual nuclear wasteland. You're supposed to tear down all the buildings, all the sidewalks, all the roads. You're supposed to dig up the whole bloody thing, put a 12-foot fence around it with radioactive signs recognizable in worldwide, and never go there again. Not pick up bags and move people back in. It was the worst accident at a nuclear power plant since Chernobyl. And in all honesty, I am sick to my guts of saying that sentence over the years. And Chernobyl was brutal, but it ain't nothing compared to Fukushima. This was a model of the Xenon-133 dispersal, only based on March the 12th to March the 16th. And xenon is known to cause dramatic increases in lung cancer, which of course they're trying to blame now is on the radon, which is ludicrous. Bombards humans with powerful X-rays, turns into cesium, and that the xenon from Fukushima was the most ever. Claiming it's only 2.5 times Chernobyl is absurdness, by the way. It's thousands and thousands of times Chernobyl. Restrictions were removed in a small part of a nuclear wasteland in March 2020. Japan has reassured the foreign diplomats about safety. So try to show this. If you had those diplomats and you were giving them food, you say, look, this is where we got the food from. How many of the diplomats do you think are going to eat it? How many of the diplomats do you think is going to get up and run out? I would guess every single one of them. Japan's officials, and we really should get rid of the word official. There is no such thing as an official anymore. Official monsters, official demonic demons, official sadistic mass murderers, official idiots, official demonic, twisted, sadistic demons. Would you eat the food from there? Is there anybody on the planet that would actually eat the food from a nuclear wasteland surrounded by 1-ton bags of radiation? The farmer should have been shot on sight for doing that. That's a rational world. I don't advocate murder. I advocate non-murder. The best way to stop non-murder is to get rid of the murderers. The best way to get rid of the murderers is get rid of the murderers. There's murder and then there's the nuclear industry. Water must be continuously pumped into 4. Not very often you hear that, is it? Because the majority of media will only acknowledge 3 reactors, 4 melted reactors. And radioactive water is leaked. Whenever I hear the word leak, I literally want to stab somebody in the nuclear industry with radioactive fuel rods, of course, from the reactors and mixed with groundwater and rainwater since the disaster. The media that publishes this stuff should probably be shot out of a cannon into the side of a mountain. You know those cannons you use at the circuses? Put an extra 50 pounds of black powder in it, point it at the side of a skyscraper, or actually put it on the top of a skyscraper and shoot them the frig off of that. 1,000 years from now, contaminated water from Fukushima may still be hemorrhaging into the Pacific Ocean. Like the whole country is so radioactive, Every time it rains, the whole country's hemorrhaging radiation. All the pollen from the trees and the flowers is radioactive, for goodness sakes, in the entire country, and of course all of Canada and the United States. China foreign minister urged Japan to immediately stop construction of the fake nuclear wastewater discharge project. It's actually fake, right? The tanks are empty. And I showed you earlier why the tanks are empty. Now, the water, and I'm not going to take it on that path tonight, but if you go to my playlist on the tanks, you can find all the other supporting documentation. The tanks at 2.2 sieverts per liter of just beta, by the way, that they're acknowledging, is much higher than that, because when you put in neutrons, like uranium and plutonium into that equation, the whole industry is insane. Oh, calling them insane is being polite. They're scumbags. So 2 sieverts an hour of better radiation from a single liter of leaked water from the tanks. What that means, though, is that the tanks are 1.4 million sieverts of just beta. So if you don't actually count the rest of the emitters, like gammas, neutrons, and alpha, which, by the way, when they crash into each other at 136,000 miles per second, they create a vicious sterilizing X-rays. So if you fill up one of those tanks at 2.2 sieverts per hour, that's 1.4 million sieverts. The tanks are not thick enough to shield you anywhere on the plant site. If you're anywhere on the plant site and one of those tanks is full, that's a lethal dose for you. So how can you build another tank there? So the fact that the tanks are built right alongside of each other is the evidence the tanks are empty, which is why they want to pretend to dump it into the ocean and get rid of it totally rather than store it somewhere else, and why they won't let anybody independently check the tanks, because the truth will come out. Like, if you go to my playlist and you see a playlist for tanks, you'll appreciate everything I'm saying to you. I quantify it all in multiple presentations on just the tanks. The industry has to be disbanded and replaced with humans. China is perpetuating the lie by pretending that the tanks are full. Right? China's speaking out, right? No, China knows exactly what's going on. So does South Korea, by the way. So does any other country. So does any nuclear academic on the entire planet. This is really straightforward stuff. So when you see these salacious stories showing up, urges Japan to immediately stop construction of a nuclear wastewater, the idea, Japan might very well say, okay, we're not going to do it, we're going to store it, and everybody goes back to sleep. Because the idea is to make you think that all the radiation is in the tanks when they have already killed our planet. Now, so after the nuclear meltdown, we launched research expeditions year after year. And from Alaska all the way up there down to Vancouver, British Columbia, the Pacific Ocean, I launched research expeditions year after year. And what we discovered was that the species, and this, I do this each year, by the way, that's up by Alaska right there on a good day, mind you, was all the species to your left are exterminated. All of them. And we know this because I went there physically many, many times. and done the research myself year after year after year after year. And my trusty sidekick, Zoe. This is low tide, about 10 kilometers from Alaska. And I want you to notice, I was taking my dog in for a pee before we moved. This was a perfect day, which was unusual. This is one of the last islands before you get to Alaska. Look at the shoreline. The shoreline is actually empty. It's naked. Look at that. There's a 19-foot tide exchange. So it should look like the pictures to your left. See that? The pictures to your left is what it's supposed to look like. Those colors are very easy to see, right? And they never came back. Those species never came back. It's a total extinction event of the species. And this is because of Japan's radioactive fallout. And you can find all that up at my site, thenuclearproctologist.org, these pictures. On the front page, just scroll down a little bit and you'll find these exact pictures. And we are in real danger. And typically this is what it looks like on the coastline. It's a tropical rainforest, right? We went there year after year after year. 6 years at least. Let me get back into the headlines down here. And so the idea is to trick you and think that everything is in the tanks, that it didn't kill all the species. That's what they're actually up to. Right, to cause this, this is orchestrated with Japan and South Korea. Expanding nuclear power to fight climate change would be insanity. Now, we covered this story before, but a good story like this keeps popping up, so we'll cover it again. Expanding nuclear power to fight climate change would be insanity. You notice at the top of each of these so-called casts, which is a fuel roger inside of it, they're vented. These ones are still empty. The ones with the vents on it are the ones that are full. The former nuclear regulatory top dogs from the United States, France, Germany, even scumbag Great Britain, recently issued a joint statement opposing expansion of nuclear power as a strategy to combat climate change. Why? There's not a single good reason to build new nuclear plants. Number one, nuclear is too slow. Wind and solar can be set up and running in just a few months or years at most. Number two, nuclear energy is too costly. Renewables like wind and solar are already the world's cheapest form of energy. And by 2019, utility-scale renewable energy prices had fallen to less than half of that of nuclear. And expanding nuclear would translate into higher energy costs for consumers. Nuclear is neither carbon-free nor non-polluting. And while operating nuclear plants don't emit carbon dioxide, which is a Freudian argument. First off, when it comes to carbon, the world's 15 biggest ships create more pollution than all the cars on the planet. At any given time, there's 90,000 of them on the ocean, which is equal roughly to 42 trillion people driving cars every day. Just one of the world's largest container ships can emit as much pollution as 50 million cars. So if you really want to put a dent into that kind of pollution, you have to go after these stupid container ships. There are CO2 releases throughout the nuclear fuel cycle. He said, in this newspaper, read claims that many that the Millstone nuclear power station, a zero carbon emitter. This is a false claim in many aspects, and I request the paper not print such claims without a corrective comment. One not so obvious source of CO2 emissions is a simple fact. Millstone and all nuclear power plants run off the grid. They need their own power plants, which is always oil, gas, or coal. Typically coal because it's the cheapest, and they need 2 of them. And the grid is not zero carbon. Additionally, it takes people, a lot of people, to operate the plant, all driving, emitting CO2 in and out of the plant. And one day I stood outside the plant's gate and asked the drivers their estimates of how many vehicles are in and out of the plant each day. Average reply was 1,500 vehicle trips, with more during refueling. So, Millstone, zero carbon? I don't think so. P.S. Will a reporter please ask Dominion Nuclear Connecticut for a copy of its electric bill and post it here? Which is a brilliant reply, right? Nuclear is neither carbon-free nor non-polluting, while operating nuclear plants don't emit carbon dioxide. We see that every single day, multiple times. And again, this is part of the brainwashing by an industry out of control. This is an industry that is completely, unequivocally out of control. Nuclear plants routinely release radiation into the air and the water through those skinny stacks. All fuel pools are hemorrhaging radiation, all of them, into your environment all day, every day. And when I say hemorrhaging, that's not even close to appreciating how much we're actually talking about. So you can put 2 million atoms on the head of a needle, but you can't see them. But if you distribute it out, that's 2 million illnesses for humans or animals or insects or birds or whatever. So how many atoms do you need to boil water for 1 million homes a day? Because those atoms are still being produced. It's called splitting the atom. They're released up those stacks all day long, worldwide, in over 1,000 fuel pools. And most of these places are surrounded by farms on top of that. These are mass murderer machines. These are genocide machines. These are disease factories. Nuclear plants routinely release endless amounts of radiation into the environment. The problem of permanent disposal of nuclear waste remains technically unsolvable. They're actually not even trying. They're doing everything they can to avoid coming up with a solution. If you tasked all your universities in your country with a solution, every student would immediately turn against nuclear power. Because they would appreciate all of a sudden the evilness that I'm showing you today. Commercial nuclear plants have become, for the foreseeable future, by the way, de facto nuclear waste dumps that are always hemorrhaging into your communities and your environment and your biosphere. You are in so much danger, I can barely hold my... I can't really use the word anger. My terror, I think it is. You don't understand the danger all day long you're now in because of this disgusting, despicable, savage, heartless, soulless industry known as nuclear. It's a heartless, gross, despicable industry. Nuclear is non-renewable like coal, oil, and gas. The United States still imports half its uranium from Russia and its cronies. Proposed temporary storage solutions, so-called consolidated interim storage sites, are a diversion. A proven geological repository for spent nuclear fuel doesn't exist anywhere on the entire planet. They're pretending, but it doesn't. 76 years later. What? If you can't come up with a solution for 76 years, it's time to get out of the way. It means you're a failed industry. It means you're not even trying. It means you're up to something evil. And evil doesn't even quantify the significance of how lethal it is what they're doing to our biosphere. Nuclear waste dry storage canisters used throughout most of the United States are a half inch to 5/8 inch. Most countries are using 10 to 19 inches. It's absurdness. It's actually absurdness. There's no room for human errors or natural disasters when it comes to nuclear. We can't even guarantee that the future societies will steer clear of the nuclear waste dumps for 1,000,000+ years. Nuclear plants are sitting ducks for hurricanes and typhoons and cyclones and earthquakes and terrorists. Well, the biggest terrorist is the nuclear industry, particularly the International Atomic Energy Agency. And the idea that small modular reactors can save the day is magical thinking. You would need tens of thousands of small modular reactors to have an impact on the climate, which is absurd just because it doesn't work that way. And because nuclear is climate change. Creating thousands of more radioactive dump sites and opportunities for both nuclear accidents and weapons proliferation. But see, this is one of the models of radioactive fallout from Japan on 20 days. A continuous plume of incredible energetic isotopes, pulsing energy almost at the speed of light every second for millions of years, destroying all the bacteria in your forest, all the fungus in your forest, which means the litter doesn't break down. So when you have lightning strikes or forest fires, they rage incredibly out of control because the forest didn't break down. We have destroyed the biosphere now permanently with radioactive fallout. Fukushima was the tipping point. Nuclear can't deliver on this and should be banned, is the outspoken position of the former head of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. The all-hands-on-deck logic of politicians who support expanding nuclear energy is faulty. Every dollar misspent on nuclear is a dollar not invested in energy efficiency and faster, cheaper renewables. And expanding nuclear will retard the progress in solving the climate crisis. Well, renewables don't work on nuclear grid either. It's 100% on purpose. Soldiers trash Japan's linked Chernobyl research facility. And of course, we covered that when they started doing this. What was Japan doing in Chernobyl, really, when Japan's a nuclear wasteland themselves? And they took the hard drives from the research facility. Big whoop. It's not like they were actually doing anything to benefit humanity. Fixing France's reactors corrosion mystery. Don't you just love that word? To take several years, French regulators warn. This is a so-called worker from EDF with a white helmet on. He's not a worker, he's management. Of a third-generation European pressure water reactor. The two plants they get the closest to completion in Finland and France, plagued by astonishing cost overruns, construction delays, and a litany of complaints over design flaws, poor quality control, construction lapses. Originally commissioned at €3 billion, the cost of Finland's is just ballooned to almost $9 billion. The head of the French nuclear regulators, ASN, said on Tuesday that fixing the corrosion problem, some of the state-controlled utilities, nuclear reactors would require a large-scale plan and several years, and also warned of more reactors could be halted. Half their fleet is already broken down, for goodness sakes. They covered a story last night or the night before that the river water is too warm and too low to continue for many reactors. Because France uses 70% of their fresh water gets destroyed in a nuclear reactor each day. It's Nuclear is nothing but a burden to the entire solar system. Warns of a risk more reactors could be halted. So France has dug a hole. They got rid of all their renewables except for a tiny fraction that they were building. And now they got nothing to fall back on. Because the renewables could easily replace it, see? So they got rid of it. The arrogance is unbelievable. It's next generation EPR reactors with a troubled history. They took a design, they didn't bother building one and getting the kinks out of it. They just started building more of these designs, which is the same reason they got half their fleet shut down today. At Flameville, Hinkley Point in Britain are running years behind schedule, billions over budget, while the EPR reactors in China and Finland have been hit by technical issues, aka the same stuff. As of today, the option of extending the lifespan of some reactors by beyond the 50 years was not granted. Thank goodness. My goodness, thank goodness. This Japanese city will pay young couples to live near old people. Israel military is rehearsing for a strike on Iran with the Americans. Israel has bombed 2 other countries' nuclear reactors, but Iran's are full of fuel pools also. They're calling it the Chariots of Fire. My God, man. The military exercise being conducted with Americans, it stands just a few, and we hear this all the time, year after year after year after year after year after year from Israel. Oh, Iran's just a few weeks away from getting a nuclear bomb. Year after year after year after year after year, we've heard Israel say that. And month after month after month. I just don't cover it all the time. Repercussions of FirstEnergy bribery scandal continues with the board overhaul. I mean, that scandal really showed you how corrupt the nuclear industry actually is. How they were buying politicians off to vote to give nuclear power plants forgivable money. So today, footage of a hypersonic, metallic, unidentified flying object was revealed by the Pentagon at a historical hearing. So, like, one of the questions we got to ask us, and we talked about this a little bit last night, was why didn't they go back to the moon? Did they really go to the moon? And if they did go to the moon, then the question is, why didn't anybody else go to the moon? Because when they allegedly went to the moon, that technology, that computer power, you can get the same computer power right now in a watch on your arm is more powerful than the computers they used to get a man to the moon. So the computers back then were the size of city blocks, right? So why didn't we go back to the moon? And there's a lot of conspiracies about the moon. What is the moon? What is it really? What the hell is going on? We don't go back to the moon. It stands to reason we didn't go to the moon. But there's also a lot of evidence suggesting the moon is not what you think it is. You know, if you wanted to do space travel, a small metallic object is not what you would use, obviously. But something the size of a moon, so you can handle an impact of a meteorite at 30,000 miles a second, would seem appropriate, wouldn't it? I'm just saying, right? I'm not saying it's true or not. I'm just saying it's a really interesting question. It's a significant question that I don't have the answers to. But in my personal belief is the moon is some kind of object that is not what we are led to believe. I don't know if that's true or not. I really don't know. But there is a lot of evidence suggesting that's exactly what is happening. And I know that sounds crazy, certainly, even to me, that sounds crazy, but it's not. Nothing is crazy anymore. So the Pentagon officials speaking at the first public hearing on UFOs since the 1960s have shown previously classified footage of unidentified aerial phenomenons. A split-second video. A split second. And my goodness, surely they must have something better than a split second. Which is, say, 30 frames in a second. They give you 2 frames or 1 frame out of a second. Right? It doesn't add up. They've had hundreds of encounters. Surely they must have something better than 1 at a 30-second frame. Zooming across the flight path of a military jet at hypersonic speed. The Pentagon cannot rule out the possibility the sighting could be connected to extraterrestrial life. Right, there is a community out there that believes the moon is an alien environment, which is why we didn't go back to the moon. And I don't know if they're right or wrong. I would like to know the answer to that one. Germany says it will vote against the EU plans to label nuclear power as a green investment. Thank goodness. The European Commission is looking to class nuclear energy as green, making it easier for states and private sectors to invest in it because you get tax breaks. Brussels is now seeking approval for EU countries and European Parliament for its plan to label gas and nuclear as climate-friendly investments. Which, what was the point of having the taxonomy if all you're going to do is just use the most polluting thing on the planet? Really, right? What's the point of it? Germany has said that they're not going to go along with it. The biggest economy is among those planning to reject when countries come to vote on the plan in the coming weeks. They're going to vote on this in the coming weeks. And so I don't know how I missed that, but I did. They're going to vote on that in the coming weeks. Nuclear energy is not sustainable and should therefore not be part of the taxonomy. But nuclear is one of the most pollutant things in human history. Over to the United Kingdoms. It's a bribe to coastal areas that could become the UK's nuclear dump. It's a bribe. Promises of jobs and investments are doing little to convince a remote Lincolnshire community to agree to hosting the country's nuclear disaster. The efforts of the British politicians to persuade the public nuclear energy is green, safe, and clean, too cheap to meter, do not seem to be gaining traction. And experts on nuclear waste, usually I have one of my frames. I'm going to have to fix this. Just give me a second here. I wanted one of my frames to zoom in on that screen. I'm just going to set that right now. My apologies. And that way I can zoom in on it when I'm talking. Experts on the nuclear waste said tell the UK builds a large underground nuclear waste dump or geological deposit facility to safely store the 70,000 cubic meters, 700,000 cubic meters of radioactive waste from the country's 20th century programs. No nuclear plants should exist. Like, who can really argue with that kind of common sense, right? Who? I noticed this one seconds. No, this is not it. One of these I should be able to zoom in and out on. I set up a few days ago, forgot about it. There we go. Experts on nuclear waste have said that until the UK builds a large underground nuclear waste dump or geological deposit facility, a deep geological repository, to safely store the nuclear waste, they shouldn't build any more nuclear power plants. They would have got fired right away. The solutions was to put forward about 50 years ago. The UK is no nearer to putting spades into the ground, and the cost of decommissioning and disposing of the country's radioactive waste, they expect is at least, well, when they say it's 131 billion, you're basically going to multiply that by 10. And so these remote little communities, wonderful little, beautiful actually communities, if you look it up, these are just wonderful places. Lincolnshire, and I'm going to butcher the name if I try it, Thorpe, and the neighboring town of Maplethorpe. This was one of somebody's garden. They put out anti-nuclear. I thought that was just gorgeous, eh? That's actually really pretty amazing, if you ask me. Beautiful work. Again today, you see when I posted my video, now the inside showed up right away, but the outside, my poll and that didn't show up. So it shows up on the inside. Let's run over to the poll here in a second. So it showed up. See that 1 minute? It showed up on the inside. Yesterday it took 10 minutes for it to show up, which is an abnormality, right? But it showed up on the outside about a minute later. But it takes quite a while before it actually shows up if I click off the page. Where's our poll to today? How did I smurf that up? Should monsters who urge victims to return to Fukushima nuclear wasteland be charged with genocide? We got 41 votes, 100% yes. The nuclear industry, I think, is finding it hard to stay on my site because the truth is so scary for these people. The truth is so scary for these people. Now what have I got done? Bear with me. Where am I? Yeah, it's not supposed to be like that. Let's fix this here. I got this smurfed up, obviously. It's gonna take me a second. I didn't know it would do that to me. We'll get it together. It could take a while. It could take a few minutes. The UK reprocessing plant to end operations. This is Sellafield, and I dug up a whole bunch of stuff for you. Marking the completion of UK Nuclear Decommissioning Authority's Magnox operating program. Sellafield, the most contaminated place in the United Kingdom, one of the most contaminated places on the planet, and it's surrounded by farmland on top of that. Let me see if I can find a picture of Sellafield. Actually, let me do exactly that, because I got a whole folder on just pictures of Sellafield. Wait till you see what I'll show you coming up here. The problem is, I got a lot on Sellafield. Let me see if I can get it to show up in my search. The problem is you got 4 hard drives, you got around 10 terabytes, and I only got about 1 terabyte of free space because we've been at this for so long. I have so much documentation, it's ridiculous. It's not showing up per se. Don't give up on me yet. Okay, here we go. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, this was the craziest thing imaginable. I looked for pictures of Sellafield, I remember, and I was totally shocked to see it surrounded by farms, as far as you can see. It had a meltdown in the 50s that they hid for almost 50 years. Still 8 million liters a day going into the Atlantic Ocean, which is right there. But when you really look at it and you start zooming in on these farms, and you got to realize they're reprocessing mixed oxide fuel, basically, also known as MOX fuel, and you're boiling the fuel rods at 3,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures in acid. And so the releases are extraordinary. So guess what happens to a lot of the radiation? Ends up in the farms. And so Cumbria, which is a little community close by, had cancer clusters in children of leukemia. We actually got academic studies where they claimed it was caused by the flu, not by radiation. So you can't even trust the academic journals. You're in real trouble. But look at this, surrounded by farms. That should make you throw up because of the significance of the poisoning. Can you imagine how many millions of people gets poisoned by this stuff? By eating the food from around this place? It's surreal. The evilness is so surreal that it's almost, like this is vegetables right there, obviously. But look at the farms right up to the property. That has to stop. You got to get rid of these nuclear power plants and those farms. You can never grow food here. It's just like, it's heartbreaking. So they reprocessed nearly 55,000 tons, which is 110 million pounds or something. Stillbirths among offsprings of male radiation workers at Sellafield nuclear processing facility. They're trying to blame that on. They also try to blame it on population mixing and other things. Child cancer around nuclear fuel reprocessing plant at Sellafield. Origins of ages, ongoing radioactive contaminations of soil of La Hague, which is France's. And so you can see the types of emitters. This is just a fraction, by the way. 239, 240, 241, 238 plutonium, 241 americium, which decays to 241 plutonium. Current ratios of strontium. So corrosion nuclear fuel reprocessing plant, corrosion boiling nitrous acid. They've contaminated the entire Arctic between them and La Hague from France. So imagine how bad the farms are going to be. Okay, so another facet of this was that for about 30 years, United Kingdom took their high-level nuclear waste, put it in crushable 45-gallon drums, and just drove around the Atlantic, throwing them off the boat as they're driving along. So each 33 feet the barrel is sinking in is another 14, 15 psi per square inch. So when they sink down to a couple of 100 feet, the barrels will crush and the lid will come off. Now, they're not the only ones that were doing it, but they're one of the worst offenders. Dumping of decommissioned nuclear submarines also at sea. Let's just walk down that road for a little bit. The number of nuclear submarines in operations worldwide by 1984 was 585 nuclear submarines. Russia has over 160 ran aground that they can't decommission in just one place in northern Russia, by the way. Nuclear fuel is removed from the reactors, they claim, prior to decommissioning. Of course, the United Kingdom has 19 nuclear submarines down there. That's not true. They haven't decommissioned any of them. Substantial radioactivity is still contained within the steel walls of the reactor vessels, as well as in the bulkheads to separate the vessels from the rest of the submarines. And certain of the radioactive elements contained in a decommissioned nuclear submarine will remain toxic for hundreds of thousands of years. And despite the presence of this radioactivity, certain governments consider dumping these nuclear submarines at sea. An American Navy initially advocated such a program on the grounds it's cheaper. That is cheaper. Japan, least worst option. This was another study I ran across, but it doesn't show you anything. It just gives you this one sentence. Dumping radioactive water in the ocean might sound like a terrible idea, but the alternatives are probably much worse. Really? Really? The alternatives? Well, then the nuclear industry needs to be disbanded, and everybody like him should have fuel rods shoved up in their rectums. The sunken nuclear submarine Komsomolets, which is a Russian scuttled reactor with torpedoes, by the way, and nuclear reactors, and its effect on the environment. This is an academic study, but get a load of what they're going to try to tell you. He said they found, I got to zoom in on that one. It is found that neither the submarine hull nor the reactor vessel will be destroyed by corrosion at the bottom of the ocean for at least 1,000 years. Is there anybody on the actual planet as stupid enough to believe that statement? And then the question obviously is, how friggin' evil have you got to be? I got another hand pointed up behind me. What the hell? Oh, that's because I'm zoomed in, right, on the TV screen. My apologies. That's got to be pretty weird looking. They're twisted and sadistic little demonic demons. Said the isotopes, plutonium isotopes from the reactor, or no evidence of releases of plutonium from the reactors or the nuclear torpedo warheads. And this was a joint study by Norway? Yeah, Norwegian Defense. The last people you want to be trusting on the planet is the military. Radioactive waste was dumped in Holyloch, which is Scotland's harbour, says ex-Polaris, which was a submarine's captain. I didn't know this story. We're going to do that again, are we? This reinforces and confirms the fear we have had. We've been getting particularly worried about the Clyde, which is contaminated because of Sellafield, also, and the northern parts of the Irish Sea because of nuclear discharges from Sellafield and from other sources. The US Navy in London insisted that all of the discharges referred to by Captain Bush were well within environmental guidelines. And anybody, you have to be insane to trust anything the Navy tells you. Their job is to rape and murder everything in your countries that they invade, to destroy everything in the country, particularly the civilians, because the civilians don't fight back. Monitoring carried out in Holyloch and surrounding areas by British scientists have shown radioactivity to be normal background levels by British scientists. But a physicist interviewed for the program says an accident on a nuclear submarine would be the same scale as Chernobyl. But to say that the radiation released was no different than background, they're talking about the cooling water that is in physical contact with the reactor core. To claim that that is the same as background, they should use the name of those scientists, so that we can get them on the rack and stretch them until they split apart. Because that's evilness in overdrive. This story here will really tell you infinitely lots about. Now, this is back from the 70s, dumping nuclear waste into the sea. The deliberate disposal into the sea of nuclear waste by dumping began in the late 1940s. The U.S. stopped the practice allegedly in 1970, but is now reconsidering its options. Several European states, United Kingdom, France, Germany, Switzerland, Belgium, Netherlands, Sweden, have dumped bulky nuclear waste into the North Atlantic. Ignore the low-level waste because this industry is sadistic. The United Kingdom, on the other hand, a major user of the ocean for that purpose, is today actively engaged in an attempt to have these controls altered in order to legitimize the eventual disposal into the marine environment of all nuclear waste, including high-level nuclear waste. Like to do that to the ocean the way what they've done and all these other countries done, that should have been the end of the nuclear industry right there. And if you took anybody in the nuclear industry and you try to drag them to Fukushima, they would claw your eyes out. There's zero possibility they're going to let you drag them in there. UK reprocessing plant to end, back to that story, end operations. It's a landmark moment for a nuclear wasteland with a mixed oxide nuclear meltdown. Sellafield's Limited CEO Martin Clown said, when these operations end, we have fulfilled our promise to conclude our reprocessing program in a safe, secure, and environmentally conscious manner. You're a piece of shit, man. You're a disgusting parasite. You're revolting. You're a sadistic, demonic demon, sir. He said it's a clear demonstration of us delivering our purpose to create a clean and safe environment for future generations. First off, like Donneray, which was a reprocessing facility in the United Kingdom, they estimate at least 320 years before that can be cleaned up. Sellafield is completely out of control. You haven't even tried to stop the meltdown from the 50s, dear. You still have 8 million liters a day going into the ocean, you sadistic, despicable coward. You revolting parasite. Why is it everything in this industry is just a parasite? And like the worst type of parasite. Used fuel from the United Kingdom current fleet of nuclear power stations will continue to be sent for storage at Sellafield. And what that means, unfortunately, for everybody in the United Kingdom, is that everybody who eats the food in the United Kingdom will be poisoned permanently because this stuff is constantly vented into the environment. If that don't make you sick, what would, I wonder? It's so disgusting. It's hard to imagine there's people that evil on our planet. But I can assure you, the nuclear industry redefines the word evil. The Pentagon is boosting 2 scumbag Seattle venture working on nuclear power prototypes for space. So the Nuclear Proctologist, my organization, is an actual think tank. And we advocate, being me, the president, the secretary, the treasurer, and the rest of it. You know, the equipment I use typically takes 5 people on top of that. So my life is a disaster. The Pentagon boosts 2 Seattle ventures working on nuclear power prototypes for space applications. I advocate, and with the documentation, we have no right to put this stuff into space. This is anthropogenic man-made, which is what anthropogenic means. So man-made radiation is called man-made because it's not created by the sun. We don't find these elements in the solar system. And we have no right to introduce it into that environment. Despite the fact that they had done upper atmospheric nuclear detonations for many years, that stuff is still falling out. Some of those detonations reached 1,000 miles into outer space. Like the history of the nuclear testing, a lot of those people are still alive, and they should be crushed in a wood chipper because of what those friggers done. Ultra Safe Nuclear. What a scumbag to name their company Ultra Safe Nuclear. What a degenerate thing to do to name their company Ultra Safe. What a bizarre, despicable, disgusting name to put on a nuclear company. There's no such thing as safe nuclear. They call it ultra safe, and we've covered them hundreds of times over the years. There's nothing ultra safe, it's ultra evil. Another Seattle-based scumbag, Avalanche Energy. Avalanche Energy. Now, you must have been up all week trying to come up with that name, were you scumbags? Will also receive backing from the military-industrial genocide machine. Ultra-safe nuclear technology, we've covered them just endless times over the years since they were created. They're incredibly evil people. They're incredibly despicable cowards, and they actually have all the attributes of monsters. Nuclear tech has traditionally been government-developed and operated, but they discovered a thriving ecosystem of commercial companies, including startups, which is them. It's them themselves, see? They're so used to ripping the system off, that was the best way to do it, right? Because they can write everything off. Avalanche, the scumbags, recently announced another $5 million in seed fundings, along with Zola Ventures. This is the industry. You remember scumbag Rod Adams? He's a venture capitalist. He's probably seeding that particular company on top of that. And Rod Adams was an employee of a nuclear power plant who had a blog where they would get other nuclear people and they would spend 2 hours telling you it's like a banana and a potato chip and walking in the sunshine, sleeping next to somebody, climbing mountains. Such evil people. And this is what we see. We've never come across a single person in the nuclear industry that had redeeming qualities. Not a single time. Every single one of them has been easy to prove that they're despicable, disgusting, cowardly monsters. Ultra-safe nuclear scumbag technologies is partnering with Blue Origins on a $5 million contract from degenerate NASA and the useless, soulless Department of Energy. The company also said is helping out Blue Origins and General Atomics. I didn't even know General Atomics existed anymore. Their legacy of crimes against humanity are incredible. Ukraine eyes more nuclear reactor construction after the war ends. This is what I mean. The nuclear industry is a lunatic industry. They're not going to rebuild the communities. No. Let's give them more nuclear. You disgusting idiots. You disgusting idiots. You actual idiots. to begin construction as soon as the war is over. Millions and millions and millions and millions of refugees, and all you're worried about is building reactors, you sack of shit. You revolting, disgusting parasite. You despicable piece of shit. The value of uranium rising as demand grows. Again, right, Sprout, where's the two? Sprout. Yeah, Sprout Physical Uranium Trust 2 years ago was created in Ontario, Canada. They raised money and bought physical uranium to artificially inflate the price of uranium. Because uranium had bottomed out, flatlined for 9 years straight. 2 years ago, they started up Sprout's Physical Uranium. All they done, they didn't move it to a different site. They bought the ownership of the physical uranium. And that artificially, with the help of the despicable media, artificially inflated the price of uranium. Then they convinced pensioners and investors, said, hey, look, uranium is going up. Look how much it jumped. Because people didn't know the backstory, started buying into it. It got up to $50 a pound or a kilogram, and then it went back down to $40. Because you couldn't keep the Ponzi scheme alive. It's disgusting. Every facet of nuclear. You can't find a single facet of nuclear that is not disgusting. The strange plan to fight nuclear bombs with giant rubber fortresses. So that these buildings were all going to be made of rubber. I don't even care. I never even bothered reading the story. I was just like, okay, that's too stupid. I got enough stupid. It's one of my favorite stories today. Hundreds protest against Sizewell C nuclear power station. Yes, you guys are awesome. You guys are amazing. Here's an old protest from last year, I think, of Sizewell C. Stop Sizewell C. And they're going to build another nuclear power plant in farmland in the United Kingdom. Unbelievable, yeah? Enjoy Suffolk's while you can. God bless their hearts. Bless your hearts for protesting, you wonderful people. Nearly 200 people marched against plans for the genocide machine, a $20 billion idiot nuclear plant on the east coast of England. And the protest comes after ministers deferred a decision on whether to grant development consent until early July, which is an interesting. Alison Downs from the protest group Stop Sizewell C said a decision to go ahead with Sizewell C would be a wrong decision, and that France is going to build it, has clearly not taken the community with them, and the government has totally betrayed the fate of the local people in due process by repeated commitments to a degenerate Sizewell C reactor when it doesn't have planning consent, let alone a final investment. So these people are awesome. Thank you for doing that, folks. You are amazing. How's the nuclear revival working out? The Ethan Allen Institute has joined the nuclear industry's chorus in proclaiming a renaissance for nuclear power in America. This time the hype involves small modular reactors, which only exist as blueprints. They're decades away from actually having one that can be marketable. 20-some years ago, the nuclear industry and supporters also proclaimed a nuclear renaissance. Cheap power was on the way for the US of A. Massive subsidies, loan guarantees, upfront money from utility ratepayers were put in place to pave the way for the ambiguous construction programs. And today, not 1 watt of electricity has been generated as a result of more than 20 years of massively expensive construction programs. That is the legacy of nuclear worldwide, by the way. It's meant to destroy the future of all species, see? The unfinished reactors at Vogtle site in Georgia are years behind schedule, way over budgets, and the reactor is now projected to cost $30 billion. It's actually $34 billion now. It's absurd. You could have built all the renewables you could ever need. Some executives from the utilities that were building the ill-fated power plants are serving prison time for their role in defrauding the public. So much for that renaissance. So when we hear of advanced, cost-effective, problem-solving nuclear power on the way, it's important that we learn from recent experience with technology. The nuclear power is not cheap, nuclear power is not clean, and that the nuclear industry is rife with corruption, and that nuclear power blueprints and constructions and no guarantee the public will ever see a benefit. Chris Williams in Hancock. Awesome, Chris. Thank you. South Bruce sets the stage for upcoming study results. Of course, this is the Nuclear Waste Management Organization here in Canada. This is the actual perpetrators themselves that are running the organization on top of that. The industry. Do you want to build it in farmland on top of that? Because that's the legacy of the nuclear industry. You can't be evil unless you poison everybody every way possible. And the best way to poison them is in their farms. Nuclear Waste Management Organization, which was created over 20 years ago, they expect to be another 20 to 30 years before they pick a site, another 40 years before they finish completion of it, and then 100 years to stuff it. In other words, forget about it. It's never going to happen. It's disgusting. We'll finalize dozens of communities studied regarding the deep geological repository, which will be presented to the public in the next few months. We hear this every few months, by the way. Many of the 2022 studies focus on agricultural, because the nuclear industry wants their reactors and their nuclear power plants and their dumps in farmland. They want the farms to continue to be active so they can poison you. South Bruce is one of two remaining communities the Nuclear Waste Monster Organization is considering for the site of a deep geological repository for the Canadian used nuclear fuel, which is something that should have been built 50 plus years ago. And it'll be at least another 40 to 80 years before they build it. These people should be arrested for what they've done and continue to do. They should be prosecuted and they should be permanently sealed in a dungeon. The Nuclear Downwinders Reparation Bill clears the House. It just needs Biden to sign the dotted line and to get an extension for a lousy 2 years. Because most of the victims that this covers have already died. So another 2 years, the majority of what's left will be gone. Yucca Flats. And of course, Yucca Flats is a contaminated nuclear wasteland. They want to put a repository there because of that. They spent $20 billion on litigation to make sure that it couldn't come to fruition, which is a good thing in one sense because they had an earthquake there last year. They were going to put air conditioners inside of the mountain so they could put more nuclear waste in, because the calculations for storing radioactive waste in a mountain is how much heat can the mountain hold for 200 years. And so they decided that if they put air conditioners in there, they could stick more in there. Thank goodness somebody came to their senses and said, it's not happening. Why not just put it in a proper place? There's tons of country that are isolated from populations, that are geologically perfect. It seems you can't come up with another solution. You've got to do something with it because it's always splitting the atom and everything is vented into the environment. It's a death sentence for all of humanity and all species. Nearby communities struggle with cancers and other health problems. Many fears were a direct impact of associated radiation. Right, there's around 1,800 illnesses and diseases and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries and illnesses. Heart problems, liver, lung, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline, Alzheimer's, dementia, autism, diabetes, Down syndrome, schizophrenia. The list just keeps going. Before cancer even manifests or diagnosed. Now have 2 more years to fight for reparation after a federal bill passed the U.S. House this week. Thank goodness. Following its Senate's passage, was headed to the president's desk to be signed into law. They now have 2 more years to get their paperwork in order. You got to realize how many people they actually excluded from these bills, by the way. The majority of the victims are excluded. The bill will extend the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act that created a structure for cash payments to nuclear workers and those living near nuclear activities that could be exposed to radiation. And there's a legion of academics out there to make sure they don't get a nickel. And we've covered them for years and years and years. Evil. I can't come up with anybody in the industry that's not evil. I can't point out and say, well, this person's kind of okay. I can't do that anywhere on the entire planet. Evil is the norm. The bill was set to sunset this summer, in other words, ending the payments, but with the recent bill's passage, RECA, which is the acronym for it, will stay active until May 2024, if it doesn't get scuttled in the next short while by the industry. Only counties in Arizona, Nevada, and Utah have eligible downwinders that can get up to 50,000 reparation. And those communities are believed to be downwinders from Nevada test sites. They contaminated over 1 million square kilometers in the 2019 study of Bikini Atolls. It doesn't just stay there, which begins to test nuclear weapons in 1951, but did not include any affected by the Trinity site where the first bombs were tested. We're American citizens too. We just asked, when will we be acknowledged? Cordova asked. I don't know if people fully understand the impact of this on all of New Mexico. The negative economics of people being sick is devastating. Yes, my heart goes out to you folks. People are left literally destitute at the end of their lives because they spent everything they had trying to save their lives. And a lot of them got the money and went to the hospitals and spent it on chemotherapy to kill them. Instead of like DCA, which would have cured them in 3 months flat. U.S. Representative Teresa Leger Fernandez introduced legislation last year to add New Mexico downwinders. There's no such thing as downwinders. The wind doesn't just blow one way. The water also takes it every other direction on top of that. To the list of those eligible for payments and raised the payments to $150,000. The bill was approved by the House Judiciary Committee in December and awaits a vote on the House floor. Unfortunately, decades later, many New Mexicans continue to fall ill due to radiation exposure. I know, and we covered this many times over the years. It's just, you can't talk about nuclear, unfortunately, without just endless heartbreaks. And Steve Young says he knows all about the downwinders living in Las Vegas. I bet you do, Stephen. Hope you're doing well. I know you're not, but I hope you're coming along a bit better. And so we're back in the green. James Lucid donated another 125 Canadian last night, which means we're above the board again. such a relief. And I remind everybody, there's only 2 ways you can donate to me. There are both links at the very bottom of my description. But I'm grateful to get this pressure, this 1,000-pound monkey off my back today. Let me do a shout out for everybody. How did our poll do tonight? Should monsters who urge victims to return to Fukushima nuclear wasteland be charged with genocide? And we got 100% again tonight. 47 votes. I'll end the votes. Hopefully we get another 3 votes before I do a shout out. I'll start off with a shout out to everybody that I can find in the comments section. Because that's the end of the show tonight. Thinker, Port Angeles. I had a troll here, did we? Snakes and something just trolled us earlier. I can't seem to get that. Doesn't work. Skill. James Lucid again. Thank you again, James. You're so awesome, man. Lifesaver. Albert, Chet Austin, Dana Nasana, Tony Ingram, Patrick. Patrick was on a roll there earlier tonight. Port Angeles. Oh, I see. Snakes and Doggy was making fun. Told Blanche it's an extinction, and he's still sticking to genocide. Yeah, it's a bit of a dark humor, which you expect in this topic. So my apologies, Snakes and Doggies. Hopefully you're on our side. Don Vincent. Oh my goodness. Kevin Blanche is saying the EPR in China blew in June of last year, which is correct. Good night, everybody. Kevin Blanche. Hi, Kevin. Just going to shoot down Darlene. Hi, Darlene. I mow my own lawn, Darlene. I got my own lawnmower. It's an inside joke, I think. I guess. I don't know. I didn't get it myself. There's a joke there somewhere, but just in case there's not, I mow my own lawn. Not that I have a lawn anymore. Let me see. We are the Borg. Yeah, that's the scary part, isn't it? Jeff Poor. Hi, Jeff. Stephen Young. What can we eat? I know. James Lucer got it right. Anything grown in a protective greenhouse. And that's such a terrifying reality, isn't it? Peaceware. Good night, everybody. I'm just rolling through the names here quickly. Jack Tripper. Sometimes I don't really have a sense of humor because you got to realize what I'm doing all day is just, it's hard. Like, you lose faith in humanity. I manage to keep my humor most times. My humor is pretty dark compared to most people, unfortunately, because of what I do all day long. Andrew B. Hi, Andrew. But generally, I'm pretty resilient because I've been at this for so long. And there's not much I can do, right? Only try to educate the population. Try to educate the population. Oh, it was a joke. Thank you, Darlene. I don't know. Well, I know it was a joke. I just didn't know what kind of joke it was. Was it a naughty joke? Was it a... I don't really have a sense of humor today, I notice. I'm just pretty burnt out. It's all good. I'll be better by tomorrow morning. I'll be back to war tomorrow night. I go through all the comments tonight. That'll usually calm me down. We're up to 48 votes. Darlene. No, I actually am famous. I've done over 600 interviews worldwide, Darlene. I'm known worldwide. And I put that connotation in my description, world famous, is because I know the industry hates that with a passion. And that new people who come to my site might give me an extra 2 minutes and realize, hey, wait a second, this guy actually got a point. But I know it shows up in the search engine, see? And so it's not there because I'm trying to brag about myself. It's there because I'm desperate to wake the planet up. I don't actually have a sense of humor. I don't know if you noticed that. Christopher! You got to realize I was at this for long before Fukushima happened. Nirad, you laughed, and we're going to end the poll, I think, on 48 votes. Yeah, 48 votes, which is pretty darn good. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up, folks. We got 45 likes. Let's get us up to 48. As soon as the video's over, YouTube is going to, the nuclear industry, which is lobbyists now inside of YouTube, are going to censor the rest of the, for the next 1,000 years. So whatever I get now is basically what I'll have tomorrow this time. We're going to end the poll. That was a great poll. Somebody was stupid enough to vote no, but hey, that's the way it works in the real world. Yeah, thanks, Dana Nasana. Appreciate it. Snakes and Dog 8. I get it. I just, because originally I only had your first comment, and because I scrolled all the way to the top, but once I seen your other comments, I realized what you were up to. Just trying to fit in, man. Because it's a tough gig, right? Yeah, James Lucis said it's not donating, it's investing. And that's the sad part, that he's 100% right. It's all good, Darlene. Don't you worry. I don't mind. I got the thickest skin of any human on this planet, whether people realize it or not. I've been trolled by the nuclear industry for almost 2 decades. Trust me, I got a huge... I'm actually a really good person. I'm actually a really funny person when the weight is off my shoulder. I'm actually known to be a very generous and kind person, a very caring person, and a very real person. I don't live in fantasy, not even for 1 minute. Not even in my dreams. When I dream, my dreams are always reality. That's something. Okay, that's it. I'll let everybody go off and enjoy their nights. Their nights. their night. Because we've been going for 9 days straight or something like that, 10 days straight. And they're using software to censor me on the weekends, right? So my videos that I do now on the weekend don't get no views whatsoever because they got me on a software censorship program. That's all good, man. People still watch me. Just because the numbers are not reflected, don't mean. And that sack of shit, that should be thrown down in reactor 3 and disposed of. The sooner the better. He's a despicable, disgusting, revolting parasite. That felt better. Raphael, Grossi, you're a sack of shit, you disgusting parasite. You're a demonic, twisted, sadistic demon. You're evil personified. You're an embarrassment to the human race, Raphael. You sadistic, hateful, disgusting monster. Now I definitely feel better. God bless everybody. Hugs for everybody. See everybody tomorrow night. And we got it coming your way tomorrow night. Trust me. I got a great show lined up for tomorrow night. She's going to be a rock'em sock'em. Have a great night and a great day tomorrow. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. God bless everybody. Hugs for everybody. Have a great night. It's all good, Patrick. God bless you, my friend. Have a great night, folks. We'll see everybody soon.